Okay, all right. We're gonna actually get going now. Before we debate the constitutional question and Greg's outside of the debate. So
Brexit means Grexit.
so thank you all. So thank you all for coming to tonight's debate. So tonight is a very interesting debate. It's the Godkin newcomers debate. So this is a debate which is professionally judged by our head judge, Chloe Ferguson, also known as the student officer for campaigns and engagement, and Emily Monroe and Tira Chisholm. They'll be judging tonight's debate. So the motion is that this House oh gosh, this House would support mandatory vaccination. So it should be an interesting debate in light of the developments around coronavirus and the vaccines going ahead. So I'm looking forward to it. We have one speaker tonight who will not be being judged. That is Mr. Ryan Hoey. He's standing in for a last-minute dropout that we had just an hour or so ago due to family reasons. So Ryan will be speaking as a swing speaker, but will not be being judged. There'll be no vote on speaker ability after tonight's debate. There will be a vote on prior opinion, though, on the motion itself. The judges will leave during the deliberations, and they will then come back and announce which team won and which individual speaker is crowned the Godkin champion of this year. So it's interesting. I'm looking forward to it, and it should be a very good debate. But first things first, we start off, as we always do, by turning to Mr. Matthew Sullivan to deliver the minutes.
Thank you. Okay. On the 19th of November 2020, the Queen's University Belfast Literary and Scientific Society convened for the 8th ordinary meeting of its 172nd session for the motion, "This House would create designer babies." As usual, the meeting began with announcements from President Matt Lee and then the minutes. This was followed by private members' business. Jack McAfee raised the news that Iran had broken their no nuclear weapons deal, mentioning rumours that Trump had to be talked down from launching a nuclear strike against Iran. Responses were heard from Grant Warren and James Orchin. James Orchin brought up the situation developing in France, with Macron asking Islamic religious leaders to commit to upholding French Republican values. Responses were heard on that from Emily Monroe, Grant Warren, and Umar Ziam. And Ben Cavan brought up the debate held by the Literific on abortion the previous Monday. Responses were heard on that from Jamie Warren, Jack McAfee, and James Orchin. After President's questions, the vote of prior opinion was held, with 5 votes for the proposition, 7 votes for the opposition, and 5 abstentions. Speaking first for the proposition was Jamie Warren. He gave a short history of the field of genetics, before going on to say that the proposition was advocating for the use of IVF and gene therapy to combat infertility and improve quality of life, rather than just inserting desirable traits into babies. He gave the example of diseases such as pancreatic cancer, once thought untreatable, but which was now treatable due to advancements in genetics. He gave a further example in the case of CRISPR-Cas9, a gene editing technique which was used to genetically modify 2 twins, Lulu and Nana, to prevent them from inheriting HIV from their HIV-positive father. Speaking first for the opposition was Ben Cavan. He began by saying that the opposition agreed with the proposition that genetics should be used to improve quality of life and cure genetic diseases. He argued that genetic modification was a slippery slope, presenting real dangers. He argued that while it may start with preventing genetic diseases, it would lead to allowing parents to choose the traits they want in their children, which would then lead to a white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, and majority male culture as parents imprint their own biases onto their children. Speaking second for the proposition was Jacob Glenn. In his maiden speech, he began by saying that with proper regulation, genetic modification would not get out of hand. He claimed that God would want us to improve the lives of humanity by any means, including curing hereditary disorders, arguing that the world would be much better off if fewer people had to suffer from genetic disorders such as cystic fibrosis. He gave the further example of a gene in fetuses which can result in miscarriage, arguing that the ability to prevent these miscarriages would be of great benefit. Speaking second for the opposition was Sophie Clark. In her maiden speech, she stated that the benefits of genetic engineering are still many years in the future. She gave the examples again of the twins Lulu and Nana who were genetically modified, but argued that the dangers involved in this procedure were too great. She argued that the risks involved in modifying every cell in the human body were too great and asked why we should gamble with something that nature does for us anyway, when there are safer alternatives such as IVF. She further argued that genetic modification would place too much pressure on such a designer baby, saying that no amount of genetic engineering could make a child invincible or immune to life. Speaking third for the proposition was Ayana O'Hara. He attacked the opposition's claim that allowing designer babies would lead to a more white Anglo-Saxon Protestant culture, saying that it was very unlikely that minorities would genetically engineer themselves out of existence. He pointed out that genetic modification is not a novel topic, that the selective breeding of dogs was a form of genetic engineering that humans had been practicing for many, many millennia. He gave examples of the selective breeding of food crops and pointed out that almost all of our modern fruits and vegetables were genetically engineered. He further argued that even the selection of a person to have children with is a form of genetic selection. He concluded by saying that there is nothing ethically wrong with preventing future suffering and preventing debilitating conditions. Speaking third for the opposition and concluding the debate was Anthony McNutt. He began by saying that while the proposition had mainly spoken about improving the quality of life of a child by preventing genetic disorders, this could well lead to optimizing other aspects of the person. He argued that if there was a societal preference towards certain traits, this would result in society trending towards having many more people with those traits, reducing overall genetic diversity. He also argued that parents may not necessarily seek modifications purely to improve their child's quality of life, and that they might select for other traits such as gender. Questions were heard from Matthew Sullivan, HLM, Jack McAfee, Grant Warren, and Jack McAfee. The vote of speakerability was held with 10 votes for the proposition, 8 votes for the opposition, and 2 abstentions, meaning that the motion carried and this House would create designer babies. May I take the minutes as read? I will take that as a yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew, for the minutes. So now we turn to private members' business. This is the part of the night where you can raise an issue that you've seen maybe in the week or something that you've been thinking about that you want to gauge the House's opinion of. So does anyone have any pieces of private members' business that they wish to raise? Or raise your hand now. Okay. No one have anything at all?
Wait, I think Pedro has one.
Hello?
Hello.
Okay, so I was in town earlier today and I noticed something that I usually notice a lot, but I always walk past because it never seems like a big deal. I saw the, what I assume, the LGBT and what I also assume like a group of Christian preachers all, aimed at each other, sort of shouting at each other. What are they trying to get from this pseudo gang meet? I don't understand why they always meet up at the same times and just blast music at each other and sort of do nothing.
Okay, does anyone have any views on the Christian street preachers that have been recently kind of protested in a way by the LGBTQ plus community? Jack McAfee.
Hi, the debate over that has been going on for a long time, and it seems a bit weird to ask that they have always kind of gathered, but one side feels oppressed by the other side, and the other side is out there. I mean, it's Belfast, you know how it is. You see Christian preachers all over the place. They're kind of just butting heads. I don't think it's productive. I think that actual debate needs to be had. I was kind of saying that earlier before recording started, but I kind of get what you're hinting at is that it's not productive. You're definitely right about that. I think that we should try and get them one day. We should sit them down in front of a camera and we should get them to debate with actual points rather than just scream at each other.
Thank you. Anthony McNutt.
Hi, I don't really think it's an issue of like two equal sides. Like the Christian preachers out there are basically saying all gays and lesbians are going to hell, and I don't think that should be allowed in a public area. I think even if you respect their right to say that, it shouldn't be done when people are just going about their business. Gay people are going about their business and they're having to listen to that. Meanwhile, I think it's pretty fair, the counter.
Thank you, Anthony. We'll now go to Emily Monroe.
I think aside from the conversation on whether or not this is like constructive debate and whether or not it's worthwhile or productive or makes sense, I think it raises quite an interesting point about how far we've come in Northern Ireland, that there's a bunch of teenagers now who are happy to come out genuinely just draped in pride flags onto the street in public to fight their cause. So regardless of whether you think it's a productive debate, the fact that there are now young people with the confidence to openly come up and express their sexuality in a public forum where they hadn't been able to in the past is really fascinating to me. I think that is a good thing.
Thank you, Emily. We now go to our events officer, Ryan Hoey.
So,
sorry, I muted it. You're starting.
All right. So I just wanted to respond to what Anthony said. I don't really think that people who are expressing an opinion, it's based on their religious beliefs, saying that they believe that people in the LGBT community are going to go to hell. I think they should be allowed to express that opinion as long as they're not threatening violence towards people of the LGBT community. But where I would I'd say that when I've been in the city centre before, there's been a preacher who came up to me and Matt, who actually, well, he didn't come up to us, but he was part of the same group who did approach us, and he was sort of preaching that yes, he believed homosexuality was bad, but he also believed there were many, straight sexual sins, and that the focus on homosexuality in particular was wrong. So I think there is a debate within Christianity itself about, what they focus on. And I think that as a matter of principle, people should be allowed to express those beliefs as long as they're not being overly disruptive to the businesses and people nearby. And as long as they're not inciting hatred or violence towards people, just expressing a sort of particular belief, then I have no particular problem with it.
Thank you, Ryan. So now I'll go to Mark Gilmore.
Hello, I'm having a bit of a... can you still hear me okay?
You just
Am I
went
still...
back in, so you're good now.
Oh. All right, so I've got my apologetics on, obviously. Firstly, I've always kind of been against street preachers, depending on how they spread their message, obviously. So a lot of the time it's only that they're actually conveying. They're not actually conveying the love of Christ. It's all this talk of, you're going to hell, and you're going to hell, and you're going to hell. I have a funny story from my RE teacher. He was walking down the street in our hometown, and he ran into a street preacher, and the street preacher was like, you're going to hell. And my RA teacher turns around and he says, no, actually, I'm going to Tesco. So listen, not the time, it's only half the message. And I do agree with Ryan. The message here is not the LGBT community is going to hell. It is, we are all going to hell if we do not have the love of Christ with us and the forgiveness of Christ. So that's the real message there. It needs to be done in love. But I would defend the right of street preachers to say it.
Thank you for that. We go to Sam McBride.
Is my mic working? Oh, it's
Great.
hello? Is my microphone working? Okay. I don't believe that being able to go into the streets and say anyone's going to hell is very constructive in any sense of the word, but it's extremely hypocritical for these preachers to be going out and just randomly inciting something kind of hateful, as in you're going to hell, and then go around and say that they're preaching the love of Christ towards others. And I'd be very on the side of the counter protesters, usually calling them out on it, as they're not saying anyone's going to be eternally damned for their sins.
Thank you. Ryan?
See, the problem is with me when it comes to kind of the rhetoric of, if you're gay, you're going to hell. It's never, as people have said before, it's never centered around, if you commit sexual activity or if you don't believe in Christ, you've committed a sin and you could perhaps go to hell. It's, you're gay, you're going to hell, which is what I don't agree with, because essentially it appears more to me, and like religious organizations have done amazing things for a lot of people out there, but I do believe there are some people who use religion as a kind of justification for their homophobic views, which I don't personally agree with, especially since I personally believe there's a lot of things in religion that should be promoted, such as, love thy neighbor and other things like that. And it's a shame that these people are kind of painting Christianity as, or any religion for that matter, as kind of this homophobic thing when it shouldn't be, and that's a shame.
Thank you for that. Shannon Myers or Pedro, depending on who's behind the account.
It's me this time. I just thought it'd be interesting to say how different it is here than it is to where I come from in England. Back in my hometown, there's preachers there as well that go into the town centre, but the things that they say is so different to what they say here. Whereas here there's this whole face-off between the preachers and the LGBTQ community, because obviously they're inciting each other with what they're saying and things like that. Whereas in Swindon, preachers usually just sit there and sing songs, and there is none of that, and it's really, I guess, makes you think about the different kind of culture that Northern Ireland has and how different it is in terms of their religion here compared to where I come from back home.
Thank you, Shannon. Go to Ben Cavan.
Yeah, I just want to say from the Christian perspective that whenever we're told in the Bible to go out and share the good news of Jesus with others, we're told to do it in a way that's full of grace and full of truth. It's a balancing act between those two, in that we need to acknowledge that one needs to repent of all sins and that we're all have fallen short of the glory of God, but at the same time, we also don't want to put too much emphasis on us, that it's about what we do, but in fact it's what Jesus did on the cross. So it's always that balancing act between grace and truth. And unfortunately, sometimes straight preachers come across with not enough grace in their message, and it's something that needs work done. And so I think whenever one judges Christianity, they shouldn't look to us mere earthly mortals, but instead should look to the Bible and the words of Jesus himself.
Thank you, Ben. Go to Tira.
I just wanted to agree with I didn't catch her name, I'm sorry, who said that just the culture here is so different, because I agree with that. Hello? Sorry?
Shannon.
Oh, Shannon, sorry. Yes, just because back in Canada, I don't think I've ever seen anything like that before, and I can see the logic behind people who are saying, there's a debate that should be had, they should actually talk about things, but in situations like that, I find that it could just not be productive in the way that we discuss things here, that we discuss things in society, that we have debates. It's not structured in that way, and then it can get ugly. I've seen it get ugly, and I think the way that they're responding to it in a very, just to me, I think a very appropriate way, where they're standing, they're making themselves present. I appreciate it, honestly.
Thank you, Tira. Kira Swell.
Sorry, I forgot to raise it down last time.
No problem. Anyone else have any other pieces of private members' business that they wish to raise? Any other pieces of private members' business? Yes, Tira.
When I was walking home today, I saw there was a protest outside of City Hall for the next lockdown that will be commencing tomorrow. I'm curious of what people thought about the idea of opening up for a week just to shut down completely again for 2.
Great. So what do people think about this new lockdown being implemented? So we've had cafes open for a week and hairdressers, etc. So things are closing again. Emily Monroe.
Yeah, I definitely support going into lockdown again. I think it's necessary to stay safe through the winter, protect the NHS, all that sort of thing. I do think, though, that implementing it the way they did and having the shops open for a week sort of in between was not the best idea, because then you see, like, there are pictures of it all over Facebook, like the massive queues outside of Primark and everything. So then you have everyone rushing out to the shops in a panic and creating just this massive mess. So I definitely feel that it could have been implemented better, but in terms of the lockdown itself, I am glad it's going ahead.
Great, thank you, Emily. Go to Shannon now.
So, like, with the current lockdown, from personal experience, I'm really upset about it. Because I started working about about a month ago now, but because my first paycheck wasn't until after I started, I don't qualify for furlough, meaning that this random lockdown that they kind of throw on us after saying that we'd go through circuit breakers and things like that means that I'm no longer getting, I'm going to be missing out on about £400 worth of income, because I feel like it's really not thought out the way that they've done with furlough and things like that, because, you know, £400 is a lot for someone who's a student who's trying to get home for Christmas. So I feel like, for me personally, it's one of the worst things that they could have done for people like me in these sort of situations.
Well, Ryan here, our big lockdown skeptic, is dying to comment.
Well, the problem is in Northern Ireland is that we've gone into a lockdown earlier than England and are coming out of a lockdown later than England. And I know that England's going into the tier system, which means when I get back, I still might not be able to go to the pub over Christmas. But I would definitely agree with Emily in the sense that by opening up for a week and then closing down again, we've had this rush of people, which seems extremely counterproductive. So obviously we've seen all the shops this week busy. We've also, if you've not noticed, I took advantage of the week to get a haircut. And when I was going to get a haircut, there was a queue of about 3 people inside the hairdressers and then 3 people stood outside. So it took about an hour to get it. And it shows that when sometimes these policies are counterproductive in the sense that they actually cause more people to congregate in the rush to do Christmas shopping, in the rush to have a haircut, in the rush to do all these sort of things. And I think that the executive has made a bit of a pig's ear of the whole situation.
Thank you, Ryan. Go to Kira Swale.
Yeah, essentially, I'm just going to agree with some of the points that have been made previously, where, you know, I do believe in a lockdown, but I think the way this has been implemented has been an absolute just pig's ear of it, as Ryan said, because at the end of the day, it's like they haven't learned from previous kind of lessons in how people actually function as humans. So it's the kind of thing where, like, I was talking to my friend who's studying social sciences, and her big criticism of the thing has been, like, they haven't... where essentially one of the criticisms of it has been essentially what basically these lockdowns that only maybe they're out of it for like a week, then everyone's just going to rush in, especially Christmas. Like, they're going to get 2 weeks of lockdown, maybe even 1 week. So that's only 2 weeks to get Christmas presents. So, of course, they're all just going to go into town on the same day and cause a massive super spreader event, which is horrendous. And it's just dumb to me.
Thank you, Kira. Go to James Orchin.
Really, to repeat something I said last week, I'm sure we're all shocked that the Northern Ireland executive are incompetent and useless at something. It's truly amazing. Nobody would ever expect that that would ever be the case here in Northern Ireland, where you have such an effective and functioning administrative government. I think really the lockdown, really, I personally don't understand the way it's going about. We're being put into lockdown so that we can open up in order to have Christmas, but then they're acknowledging that there will be a spread then, which means then we'll be not lockdown in the new year, which basically just seems to be putting us back 2 steps after taking 1 step forward. It really just seems to me to be an attempt to placate certain people, and really I prefer if they actually thought it out as opposed to trying to work out some means to let people have Christmas, but then at the same time still locking down in a manner that just shows that they haven't really thought through whatsoever.
Thank you, James. Okay, so now we'll move on to President's questions. If there is a question that you want to ask me, the President, then you can right now. So you have time for maybe 1-2 questions if anyone has any. Yes, Mr. Ryan Hoey.
Thank you, Mr. President. What is the most difficult thing you've had to do this week?
What's the most difficult thing I've had to do this week? I had to go Christmas shopping, and I absolutely hate Christmas shopping. It was very busy. It was horrible. I never discovered that Primark in Belfast has so many bloody levels. It's absolutely horrendous. So I hate Christmas shopping. That was the hardest thing I had to do this week. Jack McAfee.
I didn't hear anybody ask, so I will. What'd you have for breakfast?
I had for breakfast today toast and jam. So yeah, kind of. I actually had breakfast today, so that's good. Yeah, toast and jam. Any last questions? Yes, Mr. Thomas Copeland.
Oh God.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question is just how much money would it take for charity, of course, for us to watch Ryan wax off your moustache on a Thursday evening? I'm sure many of us have suffered over the last number of weeks, like I had, in watching your moustache on the screen. The facial fungus like that is rather disgusting, and as a consequence, I'd like to know how much it would cost in order to get rid of it at an alarming speed.
I donate.
If we could raise £80, I'm prepared to have my mustache waxed off by Ryan. So if you can raise £80, I'll get it waxed off. So there you go.
I will gladly donate a £5.
Thank you. Okay, right. So now we go to the vote of prior opinion on tonight's debate. So this is when you express your opinion on the motion coming into the debate. There will not be a chance to vote on speaker abilities. This is the only vote by the House tonight. So the motion is that this House would support mandatory vaccination. So as all those who are in favour, please raise your hand now and say aye.
Guess that's 4.
Four.
Well,
Mr.
maybe my Teams is broken. Maybe you see a different number to me. I see 4 people with their hands raised.
There's a lot.
Oh, I now see 6 people.
I see 11.
Okay. I'll put down 11 then.
Your Teams is cracked, mate.
Yeah, I think it's 11. Right, could you lower your hands now, please, then? All those against the motion that this House would support mandatory vaccination, please raise your hand and say nay. I see 6, Sullivan. And could you lower your hands now, please? And all those who wish to abstain on the motion, could you please raise your hands now? I see 5.
Cool.
Okay, Mr. Secretary, can we get the results of the vote of prior opinion, please?
With 11 votes for the proposition, 6 votes for the opposition, and 5 abstentions, the proposition has it.
Very good. So that will be the last vote of the motion tonight. As I said before, tonight's debate will be judged, headed by Chloe Ferguson, HLM, who is a kind of part of the old guard of the society now. So she will be leading the judging team along with our internal convener, Emily Monroe, and our treasurer, I was going to say chancellor then, I don't know why, Tira Chisholm. So Chloe, is there anything that you want to say to begin with?
Just hi everyone. Yeah, so I was secretary last year, so I am old guard. Just good luck. Think about like what you're saying with your teammates. And you know, consistency across kind of the front is really valued, and like structure. So yeah. Also, like we can say after, I know usually after debates like this, you'd come up to me and like in the pub and ask me for like your feedback or like after. So you can message me on Teams. Obviously, like it says student officer campaigns and engagement. My name is just Chloe. Don't worry. I can't change that. I tried to change it for tonight. Unfortunately, I couldn't. So yeah, just message me on Facebook if you want feedback after. Same with Emily and Tira, I'm sure, or whatever. So yeah, good luck.
Great. Emily and Tira, do you just want to pop your heads in and say hello as well, so people know who you are?
Yeah, hello. Same as Chloe, really. If you want anything after, any feedback, just shoot me a message on Facebook. I'll be happy to chat.
Unfortunately, I do not have a camera because my laptop is ancient. So you cannot see my face, but I am here, and it's the same thing as me. Feel free to message me for any feedback. I am happy to give it after the debate.
Okay, absolutely brilliant. So just because this is the Godkin debate and we have speakers that are new to the society this year, I will re-go through the through how our debates work, just to remind everyone. So we have 7-minute speeches. We have 2 minutes protected time, a minute at the start and a minute at the end. So after the first minute, you will hear the bell. And on the 6th minute, you will hear the bell. So they indicate the end of protected time at the first minute and the start of protected time at the last minute. We'd ask that people please do feel free to give points of information, but do not barrack. So that's repeated asking of points of information. We will not be taking any points of information from the House tonight for the debate. I think that's right. I'm right in saying that, aren't I, Chloe? So there'll be no points of information from the House, just from individual speakers to each other. So please just kind of watch. Unfortunately, you can't get involved during the debate, but there is a chance to ask questions at the end. So any points of information that you're thinking about, save them to ask questions at the end. Okay, so now it turns to me to introduce our first speaker for tonight's debate, to introduce the argument for the proposition, Jonathan McClintock, and who is a maiden speaker. So congratulations, Jonathan, and good luck. Thank you.
All right, so can you see me and hear me all right?
I can see you, I can hear you, I can't see you, sorry.
Okay, well, I'll turn my camera on now.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Okay, just to let you know, I'll have my speech on my phone, so if I'm looking down and yeah, don't see any notifications. Yeah, that's why. So to start off, just want to say, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to start by saying tonight that those of us on the proposition are going to inject some truth into what is doubtless going to be a heated debate. The opposition are likely to tell you that this is a debate about individual liberty, about the right of people to decide what they do and what they put into their own bodies in regards to vaccinations. However, we on the proposition believe that this is something that, while important, must be balanced with the need for civic responsibility to protect, as subsequent speeches will demonstrate, the weakest in our society who, for one reason or another, cannot receive vaccinations. And of course, I'm sure that's something we've all become accustomed to over these past few months, having to do things that, like, wear masks to protect people. So yeah, and yeah, subsequent speeches will deal with that on those who can't receive vaccinations and on the concept of herd immunity. For my speech, however, I will be dealing with the issue that often comes up in this concerning liberty in particular, and that is the exemptions often argued that should be given for philosophic or more commonly religious reasons, which we on the proposition believe are harmful and should be at the very least extremely limited, if not outright banned. And like I say, these are often the most frequent exemptions given for mandatory vaccinations. And one article I read on this has called them exemptions of convenience because they're often extremely easy to get and often, particularly in America, have been the cause of very severe outbreaks of otherwise preventable diseases by illnesses like measles that could be cured by vaccines. And of course, to start with this example, in particularly the case I looked at in America, a lot of states require vaccinations as mandatory for children to attend school or university unless they have a legitimate exception. And religious liberty is often given, particularly as a case for this. And it's argued that by requiring people to go against their religious morals or scruples, that they're, needless to say, that they're being infringed upon their rights. However, there are at least 3 or 4 states in the US that don't allow these kinds of exemptions on religious grounds. And one of these in particular that provides an interesting case that I looked at, that I found, is in Mississippi, where the Supreme Court there in that state abolished such exemptions, arguing that not only did requiring mandatory vaccinations not infringe on people's religious liberty or on the separation of church and state, but on the contrary, that if it violated any rights, it violated the right to equal protection, both for children whose parents were denying them the ability to be protected by vaccine, and perhaps more importantly, children or people they might come into contact with who couldn't have vaccinations, thus making them so much more vulnerable to these diseases. And an example of this, well, 2 examples I found of this, was given one only like a year ago, where there was like a marked increase in cases of measles in the US, in some states rising by 300%, and which was verified to have been caused by people not taken a vaccine in many cases where they could have and perhaps indeed should have, and even more specifically on religious grounds. Before that, in 2013, New York City had a extremely bad case of measles outbreak that was almost exclusively found in an Orthodox Jewish community in that city, who, on the whole, it's believed don't vaccinate their children using this religious exemption. And to make this the killer, this outbreak was stemmed to a 17-year-old who had not been vaccinated and had basically caused an outbreak among children who had. So, to everyone out there, just saying that we on the proposition today would cause you to vote for this, because this is not about individual liberty. It's about loving the most vulnerable in our society. And that's it.
Thank you, Jonathan, and congratulations on your maiden speech. So thank you for speaking in tonight's debate. Best of luck. So now we turn to the second speaker of tonight's debate, our first speaker for the opposition, a swing speaker who will not be judged because, as you may recognise, he is not a new face in tonight's debate, but someone that will give a good speech, no doubt. So, Mr. Ryan Hoey.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, about just over an hour ago, I was sat on my bed in my pajamas doing my essay that I've got due, and I was told that someone had dropped out. So I heroically jumped in the shower and decided to do this debate. Now, because obviously I am not a new speaker at the Society, and this contest is as rigged as the US election, I cannot win tonight, despite the fact that Matt won last year, even though he didn't deserve to win. So let's hope we don't have a repeat of last year and we actually have a winner who deserves to win. Anyway, so I'd like to start off by correcting with some rebuttal to the proposition that we are not like that guy who stands outside the library on the opposition. We're not people who are, anti-vaxxers. We don't believe that coronavirus was caused by 5G and that it's all a conspiracy to indoctrinate the population. Instead, what we are going to argue tonight is that mandatory vaccination is not the best way to ensure that the general population gets vaccinated. I'm going to go through a story that sticks in my mind from when I was younger, because I used to believe in mandatory vaccination. And it was actually when I was at a family get-together, and because my family is quite strange, we sometimes have weird debates on random subjects. And it was actually at this family get-together where my mum, who works for the NHS, convinced me and most of our family that mandatory vaccination is not the way to go. Now, she works in general practice and had quite strong views on this. And her basic argument was that in the UK, we have about a 94% vaccination rate. And we've had a lot of talk this year about herd immunity and people saying that obviously to get to herd immunity, we would have to kill hundreds of thousands of people, kill granny, all the rest of it. But what the sort of herd immunity she was talking about, is the fact that when you vaccinate 94% of the population, the 6% of the population that aren't vaccinated are already basically protected. You've reached a level of immunity, which means that the disease cannot spread so easily, and therefore the 6% who haven't yet been vaccinated are basically protected to a large extent. Now, this year we've heard a lot about general externalities. Now, I'm a libertarian generally, but I believe in the harm principle, which is that the state can use coercive force in order to protect individual actions that have a negative consequence on other people. But if I choose not to get vaccinated and then die of coronavirus, it's mostly on me, and I kind of deserve to die at that point because I've taken in the rubbish of people who are anti-vaxxers. But I'd come back to the guy who stands out the library and believes that vaccines will cause autism or whatever. How do you convince that guy to get vaccinated? I don't think you can. What penalty will you impose if he chooses not to be vaccinated? I'd actually like to hear from the proposition, if one of them would like to intervene, to say what they propose as a punishment if the guy does not get vaccinated. And I think Jack has his hand up.
Point of information, I'll just take that. So basically, I think that the best way of handling it, because these people have very tricky opinions, are very cemented in non-scientific basis, is the whole idea behind them is they don't trust scientists or doctors, but they trust one specific doctor who said they cause autism. It's going to be very hard to get through to these people. But mandatory vaccinations, if they don't get vaccinated, I'd say fines are probably the best way to do so. And I know
Okay, thank you
he's
for that
not
point of
particularly going to be
information,
happy. But
because I'm short on time. So, you've mentioned here the point about that you would find the guy. I don't think if you find the guy who stands outside the Maclay and believes passionately to his soul that the vaccine will cause him great harm to his health, if you could fine that guy for everything, every penny he has, and he would not take the vaccine. You could imprison him and he would not take the vaccine. He would only take it if you forcibly injected him with it. I don't think he'd even take it if the punishment was death. So my point would be that if we, as we do on the opposition, believe in vaccination, that a better route would be to focus money on educating people, pushing back against some of the anti-vax nonsense on the internet, not censoring it, but actually arguing back against it. And also maybe a more effective way of ensuring that most of the population get vaccinated is, rather than punishing them, we've pissed a lot of money up the wall this year already, so we might as well just pay people to take the vaccine. I know that if I, for example, if it was voluntary to go take the vaccine, but there was no incentive for me to do it, I probably might not take the COVID vaccine because I'm low risk, and I think I might have already had coronavirus anyway. But the point here is that if we give incentives to people to take it through a financial incentive, then lots of people might, and it would actually probably be cheaper to spend money paying people to take a vaccine than it would to spend tens of billions more on the furlough scheme. So the general point here is that making something mandatory, using the coercive power of the state in order to enforce vaccination, is not the best way to go. That you have to educate people, you have to give them an incentive to take it, so you get those people on the margin, because you're never going to convince the guy who stood outside the library that vaccines are good, but those people on the margin, you need to give them the information, you need to give them the incentives in order to take it. So that's the basic argument of the opposition that we're going to be laying out tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ryan, for that speech. There was a few problems in there. Obviously, I'm glad that I'll be the only Godkin winner in the household as of tonight. And also, you did swear, so I will be fining you. So I think, to be fair to you, the swear word wasn't too bad. But I'm going to fine you a packet of midget gems because I fancy them. So there you go, Ryan. There's your fine for swearing in tonight's debate. So now we turn to the next speaker to continue the case for the proposition, which is Cleona O'Donovan. Thank you.
Thank you. The House would support mandatory vaccination. My name is Cleona, and I'll be the second speaker for the proposition. I hope to delineate the point that despite the uninformed and more abstract entreaties of the proposition, of the opposition, we all know the prospective enforced vaccination to be in the best interest of all of us. But more than just general public health, I'll be focusing my argument on those that this debate overlooks. The people who, unlike our opposition, are not privileged enough to have the choice to be vaccinated. It is these most vulnerable who we forget, whom I would like to remind the opposition should be instrumental and most relevant in the result of this debate today. A vaccine, for those who don't know, is a biological preparation to provide us with active immunity. It does so typically by containing an agent resembling a disease-causing microorganism, often made from weakened or killed forms of the microbes. This prompts our body to develop an immune response and thus protects us. However, what not even I had thought about much before now was, what if it didn't work on me? I hope none, or very few of us, has ever had to question whether what protects the rest of the population could potentially kill us. However, this is the reality for many with compromised immune systems. Thus, instead of having their white blood cells learn from the vaccine's microbes how to tackle the virus, they are at risk instead of succumbing to live vaccines. But as well as those immunocompromised, there are many groups that are not as lucky as we are, of having the choice to be vaccinated. I was surprised to find that the flu vaccine can't be taken by children under 6 months, or by those moderately to severely ill. The pneumococcal vaccine too is limited, not taken by babies, adults over 65, and upsettingly, the very 2 to 64-year-olds at increased risk of pneumococcal infection. Every next vaccine I read about had more restrictions than I'd ever hoped to consider. Shingles vaccines, for example, are recommended also to be avoided by those ill and by those with weakened immune systems. Almost ironically, the very vulnerable people in most need of protection against these illnesses are the very people who don't have the option of vaccination like we do. I went on to read the case of Brooke Balk, a 10-year-old Californian diagnosed with cardiomyopathy at a few weeks old. Since her heart transplant at the age of 2, Brooke takes immunosuppressants. These are taken in order for the transplant patient not to reject the donor heart, but suppress the immune system, leaving transplant victims much more susceptible to infection. This also means that Brooke can't take most vaccines, as she has a severe risk of an adverse reaction to live vaccines, such as the ones we take for measles, mumps, rubella, polio, and the flu. Never before had I felt so privileged than I did, reading Brooke's mother's worries. The question of who Brooke can play with is dictated by her having to ask other parents if their children are vaccinated. The question of whether Brooke goes to school is dictated by what's going around, as an outbreak of mumps in their town left Brooke's family's housebound for her safety. The question of whether immunocompromised, vulnerable people like Brooke can feel safe or not is entirely dictated by our actions when it comes to ensuring that we do all we can not to propagate what they can't be expected to fend off. However, Brooke's mother recently found solace in Senate Bill 277 of 2016, introducing mandatory vaccination for those not exempt like Brooke, which I'm sure, despite Ryan Hoey's point, she finds much more comforting than being 94% certain her child is safe. Basing these clear ethical, if not only sensible reasons for vaccination, I struggle to see any rational argument that the opposition could have to defend selfishly putting others at risk by not vaccinating. The health risks any anti-vax movement claims there to be are heinously unfounded. Health skepticism was understandable at one point for new medicines. To many, the thalidomide scandal of the 1950s comes to mind, a drug taken by pregnant women, resulting in thousands of catastrophic birth defects and miscarriages, might be the fear factor the opposition hopes to attack you with. What anti-vaxxers mightn't know is that thalidomide was synthesized by German doctors Kuntz and Keller accidentally on another project in 1954. Not only that, but it was registered for a patent in the very same year. The opposition cannot possibly hold similar health worries against vaccines, a more exact medicine, which now undergoes 4 phases of study after lab testing, and under normal circumstances take 10 to 15 years to complete all phases. The side effects of the flu vaccine have over the years been studied to be fever, sniffles, fatigue, muscle aches, but no, not autism. Whereas healthy skepticism can be sensible with some medicines, unenforced cynicism is simply ignorant and damaging in the extreme when it comes to public health. And when it comes to measuring the unbased, conspiracy theorist-like and inconsiderate claims of the opposition up against the all too real fears faced by people like Brooke and her family, we all know which carries more weight. What it comes down to is what kind of society we are. We would all like to believe that we have the correct amount of compassion and socialism to look after those we deem vulnerable. It is for these reasons that we offer employment benefits for those with sickness or disability, that we offer monetary support for those raising children, in particular by themselves, that we go about our way of making sure that the people we care about won't be forgotten about by the system. But what good is claiming to look after the vulnerable if we can't consider how our choices to get vaccinated affect them? For those of us able-bodied and privileged enough to be vaccinated, privileged enough to ensure that as well as not contracting sicknesses such as COVID, that we won't perpetuate its spread to those who are not as lucky as we are, I implore you not to be selfish, not to look for an incentive or money. With the privilege we were granted, there needs compassion and there needs duty, and there irrefutably needs the social and civic duty to vaccinate, if not for us, for those who would ask only that. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Fiona, for that speech, and congratulations, and best of luck in tonight's competition. So thank you, Fiona, for the speech. Now we turn to the second speaker for the opposition. To continue the argument for the opposition, Shannon Paler.
So I would like to start by clearing up some discrepancies here. Firstly, as the opposition, I am very, very pro-vaccine. I am very in support of preventing these dangerous conditions and illnesses spreading through our society. The one thing I am against is it being mandatory. When you make something mandatory, this will only produce an effect that will make people agitated and against the whole idea of vaccination. Making it mandatory means that you're affecting future generations whose only sight can see that they have to do something on purpose, and you're affecting the amount of people, especially in today's society, who feel they have their freedoms, and feeling that their freedoms are being restricted will only hurt how many people will get vaccinated, want to be vaccinated in the future. I would also like to rebuttal about caring for people with compromised immune systems. They are protected without mandatory vaccinations. There is enough people in our society who do get vaccinated every single year that they are protected by our society. Our society does not need to be forced into protecting the vulnerable. They have chosen to do that themselves. As the opposition to mandatory vaccination, I'm here to explain why making it mandatory is not a good decision, even in today's climate. I would like to start by explaining that we are in full support of vaccines, that preventing the spread of serious illness is crucial, but that mandatory vaccination is not the only way forward. There are a multitude of vaccines out there with a blockade of subjective effectiveness. Take rubella. On average, people are protected for anywhere between 10 years and 20 years. For mumps, it is anywhere between 1 and 10 years. Having a vaccination rate of 100% does not change much in the grand scheme of things, when even if 100% of people were vaccinated, this number drops as time passes. It will always be impossible to achieve the goal that mandatory vaccination tries to achieve, making it completely obsolete. This is also ignoring the fact that even with mandatory vaccination in place, the population will never be 100% vaccinated. A significant proportion of the UK are immunocompromised or suffer with immune suppression. Many others may have elaborate settings whereby they slip through the cracks of the system and are unable to get vaccinated. The aims of mandatory vaccination are therefore completely futile. It is also clear to see that forced vaccination is completely unnecessary. For society to be protected, around 70 to 90% of people need to have been vaccinated. In 2019, over 94% of the people in the UK had their childhood vaccinations. 94%. The levels of vaccinations within this country are above safe levels of protection, and therefore enforcing vaccinations is a draconic measure far exceeding the level of action necessary in these circumstances. We also need to remember that we have the right to private and family life, a basic human right that can only be restricted under the right circumstances. Based on the evidence I have provided today, it is clear that there is very little evidence to even suggest that we should breach a fundamental human right for the sake of very little gain. Human rights should never be taken lightly and should not be wavered in exchange for almost no life improvement. Although I agree there has been a small but very loud movement against vaccination, there has only been a decrease in vaccination rates of 0.2%. This demonstrates the problem is far, far smaller than what is being suggested in the media. However, I will not sit back and accept that this is okay. Mandatory vaccinations is far too extreme for such a minuscule difference and does not get to the root cause of issues. Why not bring into the education system the importance of vaccinations, talk about how they're tried and tested, talk about how they're safe? This way, no human rights are being breached. There will be no animosity towards vaccinations because they're mandatory, and this can have a positive impact on future generations in making vaccinations in a positive, educated light. If this is the future that you would like, then vote with us. Say no to mandatory vaccinations. There is other ways forward, and we live in a safe society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shannon, for your speech, and congratulations and good luck as well. I'd just like to remind speakers that their arguments put in the chat will not be recognised by the judges. Judges have asked me to reiterate that. So now we turn to the third speaker for the proposition to conclude the argument for tonight for the proposition, Jack McAfee.
Hello. I'm Jack, and I've been given the honor of ending for the proposition. So I want to make sure that I'm not straw-manning the other side when I'm saying that you guys are all very favorable of vaccines, and I think we all are. I think that's partly why this debate comes up. When you hear mandatory vaccination, you think, oh, okay, well, everybody should be vaccinated because everyone's pro-vaccine, but then some people aren't. We've seen that tonight. But what's very important about vaccines is that vaccines are not just for you. Vaccines are for everybody, okay? It is a serious public health risk to have some people who aren't vaccinated. Now, as we said before, there are some people who have chosen not to get vaccinated, and there have been serious, dangerous diseases such as mumps and measles and all coming back and taking the lives of some people, which is frankly horrible, and it's something that we can avoid. Now, I know that simply slapping a demand or an order on these people who believe in anti-vax isn't going to change their mind, but what's important, even if we do force them to get vaccinated, is that they won't be able to spread this horrible, dangerous ideology. Now, it's not a matter of personal freedom, okay? Because we do not believe in the right. Now, I'm a libertarian. As a libertarian, we don't agree with the right to hurt other people, right? So you can do whatever you want, just don't hurt other people. Whenever you choose not to get vaccinated, you are giving someone a potentially terrible disease, yet the reaction seems to be, oh my God, this is just like that book I never read, 1984. Oh my God, Big Brother is coming to vaccinate us all. I can see some of the concerns about autism. Look, I would rather spend 20 quid in America to vaccinate my child and risk them having autism, even though there's no proof behind the fact that vaccines cause autism, than spend £200 on a baby coffin, right? Also, one of the biggest kind of alternatives Ryan brought up was the idea of herd immunity. Now, herd immunity is often used as an alternate to vaccines, but that quite literally would be the massacre granny, all that horrible stuff. The herd immunity would require so many people. In fact, it would require, no, sorry, I'm not taking the POI right now. It would require 92% of the people to prevent measles, right, or mumps. 92% of the people in the UK to prevent mumps. Now, that is so many people, right? That is 60 million people. That's so many people that if you put everybody in a massive room, you mightn't even be able to see about a quarter. Can you imagine if some of those people are choosing not to get vaccinated because they've bought into a frankly unscientifically based idea? Frankly, it is dangerous. We need to stop thinking of the idea of not vaccinating someone as simply just somebody choosing to put their own health at risk, because what they're doing is they're putting the health of everybody else at risk, and that is some serious danger. serious danger. Now, yes, obviously 95% of people are vaccinated against mumps. But what if people just started buying into this horrible, stupid idea that vaccines cause autism or other dangers, and then magically, overnight, because this idea has spread, diseases are rampant again. People are dying. It's horrible. I don't want to imagine that future. I don't think you guys want to imagine that future. So why are we saying that we should make vaccines mandatory? We can prevent that. However, the opposition has no credible way in which they can say, without relying on the good faith of some people in our society to get vaccinated, that they can prevent the spread of these diseases. Now, sure, people choose to, but that's relying on human nature and people not buying into these stupid ideas. And we've seen that they have. Herd immunity simply will not work. With the COVID vaccine, there are some ideas that herd immunity would supplement the vaccine, but that simply will not suffice. COVID spreads incredibly quick, and roughly about 70% of the population needs to be vaccinated just to protect. We need to make this mandatory. It's not as simple as the idea that we can leave people the choice and hope that they make this goodwill. No, we need to make sure that people are protecting others. It's not us, the ones who choose not to get vaccinated, who are most at risk, such as Ryan, who said he would not get the COVID vaccine simply because it wouldn't affect him. It's the people who will be affected. It's the old people. It's the people with asthma, people with other respiratory diseases who are very at risk. That's what we're worried about. Ryan, I'll take your POI.
I didn't say that I wouldn't take it because I don't care about vulnerable people. I said I wouldn't necessarily take it because the vulnerable population are the ones who are going to get vaccinated first, and so they would already be protected.
But for vaccines to work, everybody needs to be vaccinated. It's not just a simple case of you get to pick and choose because you said yourself you wouldn't be vulnerable, but they would be. Maybe these people get vaccinated, but just because you're vaccinated doesn't mean you won't catch the disease. If there's an outbreak, you're likely to catch it. And that's why mumps and measles and all these other diseases came back in America in these anti-vax communities. Do you think everybody in that community decided not to get vaccinated? Because there were some people who didn't. Now, I really want to hammer home the point. I'll take Yana's actually POI.
How attributable do you think the reoccurrence of such diseases are to the proliferation of the anti-vax movement? Do you not think it is also possible that simply these diseases have come back purely out from a statistical context?
Well, I think the anti-vax weighs a heavy weight on that because without vaccines, we are very vulnerable to these diseases. Very vulnerable. Now, maybe it's not the entirety of the reason, but it makes up such a massive chunk that I don't think we would have seen these diseases come back. In fact, I know for a fact we would not have seen these diseases come back if it were not for anti-vaxxers. I'm on my last minute, so I really just want to wrap up the point of us. Mandatory vaccinations will protect the most vulnerable. That is, frankly, a statement of fact. The opposition has nothing to guarantee that everybody will be vaccinated other than perhaps some incentive. Why not simply get everybody mandatory vaccinated? We need to stop thinking of not being vaccinated simply as a non-violent sit in your house non-issue. Frankly, spreading or risking the spread of horrible, dangerous diseases to old and vulnerable people should be seen as violence itself. And I don't stand for that, and I think it's fair to say most other people would not stand for that, which is why I asked the judges to please consider us favourably.
Thank you, Jack, for that speech. Congratulations, and thank you for taking part. Good luck once again. So now we turn to the final speaker of tonight's debate, the person who will be concluding the argument for the opposition. Which is, of course, Ayana O'Hara. So good luck, Ayana.
Thank you. Measles, polio, smallpox. The simple utterance of such words by a doctor 100 years ago would have struck a sense of fear and helplessness into the soul of any individual. However, thanks to vaccines, these diseases no longer come hand in hand with the death sentence. To date, vaccines have saved countless lives. No one is doubting that. Yet, there has been an uptick in vaccine hesitancy in recent years. People are no longer listening to the experts. They do not trust them. This may seem irrational, but social media and internet forums have provided a platform for falsehoods to permeate through society rapidly. A recent study by MIT found that fake stories are 70% more likely to be retweeted than true stories. 20 years ago, if you had said that there was a global conspiracy headed by Bill Gates and George Soros aiming to implant people with microchips just so the government can read their thoughts, you would have gotten a couple of laughs. These ideas nowadays are actually taken seriously. They're being entertained. I think it's fair to say that disinformation has ruined satire. To fix this problem, we must first acknowledge where it comes from. It has stemmed from a clear lack of understanding and trust. I cannot think of a better way to destroy any modicum of public trust that we currently have than to implement a mandatory vaccination program. Not only is it unnecessary, but it would also be in direct contravention to the Nuremberg Code set out in the wake of the atrocities committed by the Nazis during World War II. The problem is that the general population do not understand statistics. In my research for tonight's debate, I noticed the trend amongst those who considered themselves anti-vax. They all seem to incorrectly conflate the issues of risk and severity. They do not mean the same thing. Risk refers to the likelihood of developing an adverse reaction to a vaccine, while the other refers to how deadly some of these adverse reactions are. For example, let me paint a picture here. A mother has brought her daughter to get the most recent flu shot. And in a couple of weeks have gone by, and the daughter has developed a rare autoimmune disease. Now, the probability of this happening is extremely low. In other words, the risk is extremely low of this happening. However, it will seem to be the other way to the mother. What the mother doesn't realize is that if she had 10,000 children, which would be quite a feat, it is likely that her daughter, which has the autoimmune disease, would be the only one to develop such a disease. This is just the nature of statistics. We are bound to have some instances of adverse reactions amongst the population. No one is doubting the severity of adverse reactions. Unfortunately, the mother is lacking in statistical literacy and is now doomed to spread falsehoods on Facebook for eternity. This issue will not be resolved via a state-mandated vaccination program. If we want more people to take vaccines, we need to increase our efforts in educating the public and building up trust. To fill a bucket of water, we must fill the holes in it first. Such a program would serve to vindicate these conspiracy theories that proliferate in today's society. In my opinion, it would be like giving a firefighter a jerry can of kerosene to put out a fire. The bigger issue regarding such a program is that it would involve a direct violation of the Nuremberg Code. For those of you who do not know, the Nuremberg Code aims to protect people from enduring the kind of cruelty and exploitation that prisoners of war endured at the hands of Nazi experimentation during World War II. The cornerstone element of this code is voluntary consent is essential. No one should be forced to undergo a surgery or procedure without wanting to. This is a luxury that so many of those in the Holocaust were not afforded. The second code states that the result of any experiment must be for the greater good of society. There is no doubt that vaccines are of net benefit to society. However, this must be communicated better to the people. While vaccines may satisfy the second code, this is irrelevant if one cannot give consent to giving one. The end does not justify the mean. In short, we must acknowledge that a forced vaccination program will not solve the real problem here. It will only serve to exacerbate it. There will always be, as we have said, a minority of people who will not take any vaccine. However, with a greater focus on educating and understanding the public's concerns, we can ensure the safeguarding of the population without having to violate the fundamental human rights. We have done it in the past. Vaccine uptake has been high before. We can get there again. We do not need to resort to transgressions that will infringe upon the very laws that so many people sacrifice so much for. So tonight, I plead to the judges to choose the compassionate and forbearing alternative, the one that does not reduce human to cattle, the humane choice.
Thank you, Ayana, for that speech, and congratulations again, and good luck. So now I'd ask that the judges, led by Chloe Ferguson, HLM, all kind of go away, if I can say that in a nice way, and go and discuss, and then come back when you're ready and just let me know. So now we'll do some questions. So if anyone has any questions that they wish to ask either the proposition, opposition, or abstaining, we'll get to them. So in respect to you not being able to ask POIs during the speeches. So we'll start off by if anyone has any questions for the proposition. So these are questions directed to the proposition. Kira Swell.
Hello. Essentially, my computer just froze there and wouldn't let me put down my hand because I thought I was going to ask a question from the other side. So sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. Anyone else got any questions to the proposition? Yes, Mark Gilmore.
Hello. So we talked about a lot about religious exemption. I just want to unpack that a bit. What kind of religious exemption are we talking about? Because I had a wee bit of research. The only legitimate religious exemption I can see is the fact that Catholics object to vaccinations such as rubella and measles that can be linked back to fetus cells that can be traced back within the vaccine. All other churches and denominations and religions, they don't have any actual doctrine against vaccinations. This amounts to just personal belief. It's completely unfounded and completely unscientific. So why call it religious exemption?
Proposition to respond?
I would like to take this.
Go ahead.
When we refer to religious exemptions, there is a serious majority of people in the United States who believe in Christian healing, in which they reject any shape or form of medicine. That includes vaccinations. It goes all the way to include surgeries, as they believe that prayer and prayer alone will heal them. That's the specific religious exemptions that we're talking about. Now, we're not trying to slander every other church and say that they believe that, because they don't. We're talking about this one kind of specific for religious exemptions, because in America, it is quite an issue as far as it goes. Poor children die because parents believe in Christian faith healing and not actual medicine.
Opposition to respond?
I'd like to respond, please.
Go
So
ahead.
let's say that what Jack has said is completely true, and I have no doubt that it is true. There are certain people like that. That would matter if you needed 100% of the population to take the vaccine for it to work. These people are probably in a very, very small minority. Therefore, they shouldn't even matter. This kind of plays into the overall point that mandatory vaccination is not necessary. We don't need everyone to have a vaccine. We only need a certain percentage.
Thank you, Ayana. So now we turn to questions directed for the opposition. So if anyone has any questions directly for the opposition, Kira Swell.
So essentially what we've been hearing from the opposition is a lot of knowledge about, oh, you should educate yourself, you should try to educate people so they get the vaccine. However, I think I speak for everyone when I say there's hundreds, there's many diseases that basically it would be very hard to educate them for absolutely every one of them. Like, for example, there's a lot of things I've gotten mandatory vaccinations for that I never would have educated myself. So what do you propose for that?
Opposition to respond.
Do you mind if
I'm
I
happy
answer
to
this
respond
one?
to this one. Oh, go ahead if you want to respond.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay. So I think there are 2 points to be made there. Firstly, is that when I was talking about education, I mean it in a sense of vaccines in general. A lot of people believe in myths of, what's contained in the vaccine is dangerous, or the effects of vaccinations. What I was talking about in terms of education is the same way that you would get sex ed in school. You have a vaccination education where it's not about specific vaccines, it's more about the general idea of a vaccine, the fact that where it comes from, how it's tested, in a general sense of terms. It's about making people feel safe and understand what's happening to them when they're receiving vaccinations. The second point is people seem to have this whole idea that there's this mass group of people who are taking over the system, who our vaccinations are plummeting, people are going to die. Our vaccinations dropped 0.2%, but it dropped 0.2% a few years ago and raised by 0.4% the next year. There has been no significant changes in the amount of vaccinations people get. It's another example of kind of a moral panic and a moral dilemma that we need to get our heads around. And I understand that people will have worries for the future, which is why I'm suggesting that to prevent something for the future, we should nip it in the bud straight away, rather than making them be more animosity towards vaccinations by making it mandatory.
Thank you, Shannon. Proposition to respond to that. Anyone on the proposition to respond?
I zoned out a little, so I can't.
What?
I zoned out a little, so I can't.
Anyone else on the proposition wish to respond? No? Okay, right, that's fine. Any abstaining questions? So these are questions directed to both sides, or neither side in particular. Any abstaining questions at all? Yes, Jay Radcliffe. I'm going to go to the opposition to respond first, if that's okay.
Opposition first?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, on this point, this is why I was talking in my speech about how we should incentivize people. So my mum, who works in general practice, said that she's been told by the government that they will be given that they will only be paid after they have administered the second vaccine. So she was worried about how the like GP surgeries wouldn't be able to cope because they'd have to administer the first vaccine, wouldn't get paid for it, and then would have to administer it again. So my
point in my speech about offering a financial incentive is so that people actually go back and get the second vaccine. Because I know for me, as an example, when I've had to go get something in the past, in terms of a vaccination, I actually was too lazy to go back the second time and get the booster, so it did F all basically to help me. So I think that there does need to be some sort of incentive for people like me to actually go back and not be lazy and actually make sure I go and get the second dose or what have you. But I don't think making it mandatory will convince those people, like the guy who stood outside the library saying about how coronavirus is caused by 5G and all this anti-scientific nonsense, to go get it. What you need to do is craft policies that nudge people who are on the margins, people who have sort of taken in some of this anti-vax nonsense but aren't like completely gone, to make sure that they actually go and get the vaccine. So I don't know whether that completely answers your question, but it's sort of that's my main point on addressing these sort of concerns.
Thank you, Ryan. Proposition to respond?
I'll take it. So Jay asked if I think that people, or if we all think that people will be more likely to not get the vaccine. I think they will, because even though at the end of the day it is very nasty to be stuck in bed with a cold, but the end results being that COVID can be eradicated and we can go back to our way of life is a good goal. A lot of people, frankly, don't want to put up with that suffering. They'll sit at home and they'll think, oh, well, 70% of people are going to get it, so I don't need to get it. They will choose, frankly, to not do the right thing, and they'll stay at home and they'll not get vaccinated. That's partly why I believe so much in mandatory vaccination. Because people, frankly, would choose, in some cases, to be stupid and not get the vaccination, especially people who, such as Ryan, says he's lazy and will not get the vaccination. Or likely will not. Let's be fair. But it's partly why I believe that we have to support the idea that vaccine should be mandatory, because, yes, trust is gone. Yes, some people will choose not to get vaccinated because they forget we can't argue with stupid. So frankly, it has to be mandatory, or we risk vaccines not being as effective as they once were and diseases skyrocketing all over the place.
Thank you, Jack. Does anyone else have any questions at all to either the proposition or the opposition, or abstaining? Any questions at all? Yes, Mark Gilmore.
Hello, I've come to the awareness that actually my last question was actually more one for the opposition, but the last one for the proposition this time is an actual point to them. So, Jack, you reference how mandatory vaccinations are the only way in which we can fully ensure protecting the entire populace. But what if this is somewhat of an anti-productive move to make? What we've seen is 94% of people vaccinated. If it's not broke, then why fix it? What mandatory vaccination legislation, it only reinforces the belief of anti-vaxxers that the state is out to get them, that this vaccination is in fact evil and can harm them. What if it does more harm than good, and you're actually being quite anti-productive with this legislation?
Proposition to respond, please.
I think it's pretty much guaranteed that I'm the one who has to respond to that. You are right that these people will always be skeptical about what they're told, but I think that we're really underestimating the level of skepticism that we're giving these people. I don't think there's a thing that we can do to ever make them properly see, no matter how much we give them logical arguments. It's the same for flat earthers. They don't want to listen to the science that's dead in front of them. They effectively make up their own, and they don't listen to points. So we can't exactly convince them to go and get a vaccine. That's why it has to be mandatory. But if what you say is right, and it may be anti-productive, it may not get people vaccinated, well then simply why not repeal it? I'm saying try it first. That's what I'm putting forward. Try it first, and if it doesn't work, it proves not to be productive, then you're right. But right now I am wagering that I'm correct in this situation, that we're correct in this situation, that mandatory vaccination is very important because, frankly, you can't argue with stupid.
Thank you, Jack. And opposition to respond.
I can take this. So I think to answer this question, let me just kind of refer back to my speech. We have not needed a mandatory vaccination program in the past. And we can say that with confidence in that, like, we didn't need it in the past, yet I'm sure there were still skeptics back then. I have no doubt that a mandatory vaccination program would obviously work in safeguarding the population. I just feel that it's almost the lazy option. We know it would work, but there are other options out there that would require more work to do. It would require more effort, but yet I feel it would be more of a benefit to society to do those. As I said in my speech, if we were to implement such a program, it would only vindicate many of these conspiracy theorists. Why even give them the pleasure of doing so? God knows they're annoying enough online, so why even give them this luxury?
Thank you. And so just before the judges come back, I'd just like to talk about something that's happening this Friday, and that is our Lick Talk with Ian Blackford, who is the leader of the SNP in Westminster. It is going to be held by our very own Thomas Copeland, who is currently in the call, I think. And if you have any questions that you'd like to give Ian Blackford, or anything you'd like to challenge him on or support him on, or just like to gauge his opinion on, then please do send it either to the Litterific page, Ryan Hoey, our events officer personally, or Thomas Copeland personally, or me personally. It'd be really great to try and get involved in that, and that'll be broadcast on our Facebook page, as was the Mary Lou and the Great Debate events. So yeah, do get involved in that. Is there any more questions at all? I have asked the judges to be quick. Thomas, is there anything you would like to say about the Lit Talk? No? Ryan?
Looks like it's time to invite the judges back in.
I have messaged them and asked for them to hurry up.
Yes, yes. No, dude, come on.
I don't have any funny story. I do have a funny story, actually. There is one story I have, and the council has heard it before, about my suicidal hamster that tried to commit suicide. No, that's a story for another day. Right. I'm gonna message the judges again and tell them to come back. Do.
Please fill time with the suicidal hamster.
Tyrion. The story about my suicidal hamster. Okay, I'll tell you this. So we were having our first ever council meeting. So it's when we were all standing for council. So we had to be matched up with our respective kind of number of the old council. So we had a big council meeting, and we were going around kind of just talking about things. So I decided to tell my story about Sally the hamster. So I had a hamster called Sally when I was about 6, and she used to have one of those little balls, you know, that they run around in. So anyway, my hamster had lots of issues, mainly because my granddad used to kick the ball when the hamster was running in it around the house. So it used to go flying. It was quite bad, really, to be honest, looking back. But he used to hate it. So anyway, this hamster obviously had a lot of issues. So it repeatedly tried to jump out the window and off the kind of like the desktop to try and kind of end its own life, and then repeatedly tried to jump like off tables, etc. And then we found out that it had actually managed to die because it just tried to eat through lots of bleach and washing up liquid. So yeah, it eventually did kill itself. So that's the story about the hamster.
What year was this?
So I'd have been 6. So I'm 19 now. So 2001, 2007.
How old was it?
How old was the hamster?
Yeah.
How old are hamsters usually? Like, how old do they live for? I don't know how old it was. No, I think it was quite new. It was only about a year or 2 years old. No, my suicidal hamster is on public record. So yeah, there you go.
Are the judges back yet? Or
Yes, the judges are apparently done. So I've just messaged them and saying, I've told them to come back. So we'll know the result in a minute. They're rejoining in a second. Okay, we have people waiting in the lobby. There we go. All right. They're coming back now. So just 1 minute and then they'll be back. Mark Gilmore, did you have something you wanted to add to this riveting conversation?
Sure, I'll add something. Why not? I just want to say, I'm obviously not a judge, but I was really impressed with everyone who spoke. It was a really high standard, and I've no right to say this, but you should all be very proud.
Thank you, Mark. So
Thank
now,
you, that was really sweet.
after long last, they have returned from the wilderness. So we go to the head judge, which is Chloe Ferguson, HLM. So Chloe, take it away.
Hiya, folks. I caught the tail end of what Mark was saying, and I do agree. You should all be really proud of yourselves. Like, the reason we took a wee bit longer there was because you were all at a really high quality, and there was a real continuous element to your speeches. Like, there was a really strong element of teamwork across the board. And if you go on to kind of compete with British parliamentary, which is a little bit different to this because it's more substance work, you know, than rhetoric based, like that is really gonna hold on strong for you guys. And I really just think you guys should really give yourselves a big cheer for that, because you guys all did really, really well. I'm just gonna give a couple of points, and then I'm gonna announce who the team winner is and then who the individual winner is. So just kind of looking at the debate as a whole, kind of the main point of clash for the judges and for myself was on the proposition you had kind of the morality of leaving folks behind who are immunocompromised, and saying, well, we need to make mandatory vaccinations, because if we don't, you know, we're not putting in protections to make sure that they're, you know, safeguarded within society. However, the opposition then came in with the argument that when looking at the practical implications, they kind of tried to spin it on its head and say, well, actually, with their statistics, making mandatory vaccinations within the current scheme of society isn't going to make any difference. And then there was the integration of education and kind of social media and gaining the trust of the public again. So saying it'd be better in the long term to think strategically about how we can kind of gain the trust of the public over mandatory vaccinations would maybe disincentivize people to kind of get on board with the vaccination train in the long term if it's forced. Why did I just call it the vaccination train? That's honestly so odd. Yeah, so just kind of to say about some points for improvement across the board. Like I said, you guys all did really, really well in your structure. I can kind of see like the beginning, middle, and end from everyone. And that include like that's from like first proposition to last opposition. Like you all got, everyone did that. Kind of my main point, which I will just kind of drum down on, is like everyone's arguments were really, really strong. I will say some arguments were kind of example heavy, and whilst examples are great, sometimes, particularly, I suppose I come from like a British parliamentary IV kind of standpoint when I say this, like, sometimes you turn into like example tennis, which is basically instead of having an argument, you kind of just throw examples at each other. And I don't think anyone necessarily did that here, but there was the danger of maybe veering into that a couple of times. So what I would kind of just say to that is like use your examples, but don't use your examples as your point. Instead, have the analysis and have your examples to back up your point. And that might sound very like obvious, but sometimes even when I was writing speeches at the beginning, like I would like throw in like so much stuff, and then I would just go, oh, it's just all examples, isn't it? So like just kind of think about your 3-tier analysis. You know, like what are you saying? Repeat it again, and then like what are you saying again? I'm sure your amazing training officers tell you all about it anyway. Yeah, so I suppose I'm not going to let you in suspense any longer because I hate when people do that to me. So I am so pleased to say that the team, the side winner for this House of Support mandatory vaccinations in the Galkin debate is the opposition. So if everyone wants to clap in the sidebar, it's so awkward. In real life, you'd be like, yeah. So congratulations, guys. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. Congratulations, guys. Yes. That like you guys were class across the board. So obviously we were not judging Ryan there. So that was just Shannon Taylor and Deanna O'Hara. Congratulations, proposition. You were still fabulous. It was really like a tight thing, which is why we took so long. But to announce the individual winner of the Galkin for 2020, it is my absolute pleasure to say that Deanna O'Hara, you have won. Congratulations. This is the awkward clap by myself. So
congratulations, Deanna. Well done.
Yeah.
Yes.
So congratulations.
No, I think it just goes to show that I think I just read in the chat there that really strong newcomers today. So you know, I think we can like everyone should have. There should be a couple awards, you know. So sure. Yeah, thank you so much.
Well, we will, as a society, get you your awards to you when we can. So we remember that you have one, and unfortunately, with coronavirus, it's a bit harder to get it to you. So congratulations on that, and thank you to Chloe and our 2 other judges as well, which were Tira and Emily. Thank you for judging competition. We really appreciate it. And Chloe, you're always welcome in the society. You're one of the old guard that we do truly love. So thank you for coming back and helping us in tonight's debate. So just a last note from me. We have next week our debate coming up on segregated education, which is this House would ban segregation in education. So that's a really good debate coming up that I know loads of people are really interested in. So if you want to get involved in that, please do message Emily or the page to get signed up for that. Emily, I'm guessing we do have some spots on either side. Is that right?
We do. There are spaces on both sides, so
Great.
don't hesitate to get in touch.
Brilliant. If you can get involved in that, that's absolutely great. Thank you again to Ryan for standing in at last minute, being a swing speaker and still not a Godkin winner, unfortunately. And next, this Friday, we've got our Lit Talk coming up with Ian Blackford, MP, who is the leader of the SP in Westminster. That is a great event to get involved with. So there's loads going on in this society, even though we're in lockdown again. So please do stay involved with us and keep in touch. And also, our debates don't just finish now. We have a Discord server, thanks to Jay. We have 2 Facebook groups you can get involved in, get chatting on. Please do that, stay involved. So it was nice to see you again tonight. Thank you for coming, and congratulations once again to Anna O'Hara for being the winner of the Godkin competition of 2020. So congratulations, Anna. Thank you, and good night from me. Thank you.